Yeah. It's the mafia. Yeah.
He's a monkey with cymbals in his hands instead of just catching the
and
doing this.
They're giving us like a 24-hour go feed. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a Bill City. Yeah, a Buffalo Bill City. Yeah, we got Josh Allen.
I know they mentioned something about an ultrasound to check the nerve endings and everything.
Hopefully
else
he's
like
not pregnant. That would
Hopefully
be
not
a disaster. I hear that's a 9-month timeline to recover from at the minimum, is what I've heard.
Yeah, Ike McKenzie on a jet sweep. Maybe it's a fake. Honestly, it's a TD either way when you got Josh Allen making plays. Win a ball before we get a new stadium.
Someone's making a new Twitter at some point. Maybe we should do that.
Honestly, I'll just start a shared Google Doc, and that'll be our new Twitter. That'll be our new Twitter.
Just people just adding shit in.
Anonymous Hedgehog is saying "fuck your mom." Like.
This is our team forever. It is forever.
Folks, welcome into a brand new episode of the Crowd Assist podcast presented by Trainwreck Sports. Wake here with my partner in crime, Jake Mutka, as always, and very special guest, former offensive lineman for the Bills, spent 8 years in the league, first 2 with the Texans before playing his last 6 with the Bills. Correct me if I'm wrong. John Davis, former Bills offensive lineman. John, thank you for being here. How is, I guess, the off season treating you? It's a weekend, less than a week into it. We can call this the off season. There's not real football going on anymore, right?
No, not anymore. And I will make a correction. I played for the Oilers.
The Oilers,
not the old Oilers.
Man,
you know, the off season obviously started off really crappy. You know, I haven't watched football in the NFL for a long time. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I caught a Bills game, and they were playing well and kind of kept up with them because we don't get a lot of games down here, and I'm not going to go and spend $300 at a bar to watch them play. So,
yeah, where are you living right now?
I'm right outside of Atlanta, just out. We got what they call the perimeter, I-285, and I live 5 minutes outside the perimeter, about 25 minutes from downtown. So a little suburb, and as they started getting better and better, I started getting more and more invested, and started caring a little bit more and more. And then I did not feel good Sunday. I was my wife was with me, and we were going to sit down and watch it together. And I said, "Yeah, I just got a sour taste in my mouth about this game." And and I could just tell when they came out. You know, even and this is not an indictment on the fans, but even on TV, you know, when the Bills are loud, you can hear them, the fans. And the last 2 weeks, it just hadn't been there. And but you know, it's a long season. I know the guys went through a lot. Every team goes through a lot. But I just was. I was just disappointed with the overall effort. I love the Bills. Ralph Wilson and I had a wonderful relationship with each other. And I guess that's why I kind of, you know, have that soft space in my soft spot in my heart because of Ralph. But I tell you, Sunday was hard. It's just hard to, I just don't get over it like I used to.
Yeah, see, that's funny you say that, because this was probably, as a fan perspective, and I obviously don't know what it's like to play in the league. I am 5'7" and 140 pounds soaking wet, so I never stood a chance. But if Isaiah McKenzie can, maybe I can. But I, for the first time, like in the last 3 or 4 years, like I remember after 13 seconds, I was watching with my girlfriend's dad, and he's Jets fan, was patting me on the back, consoling me, like, "I'm so sorry. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone except the Patriots fan." And then, you know, years passed. I was at the Houston game. That was a terrible one to be at in person, not going to lie. But last week, it took me maybe 10 minutes, and I was like, yeah, I guess I saw this one coming, actually, kind of. It was a weird spot to be in. And you bring up all the things they went through this season. How real is emotional fatigue in the NFL or in professional sports in general? Because I can't remember an organization going through so much in one calendar year like the Bills did.
So I'll explain that to you, and that's a good point that you made about the emotional fatigue. What they went through this year, obviously, you wouldn't want to, put on anybody. I mean, it was horrendous. You lose Von Miller, you're going to lose guys. Josh Allen gets hurt. A couple of offensive linemen get hurt. Jordan Poyer gets hurt. Guys, when you have a guy die on the field, that kind of changes everything. I say die, but in the they resuscitated him and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't want to.
But in that moment, that's what they're all like. It's all running through their heads. It's
you lose all your emotions, and the only way that I can say emotionally anything equal to that, and it's really not, is that we went through 4 straight years of that the Super Bowl run of losing. And emotionally, I don't care what anybody else says, it takes a huge toll on you. And I guarantee you, I counted 26 or 27 of us that went to all 4 Super Bowls. And I think if you ask every one of them, they would all say the same thing. And one day when we were settling down in our house now, we've been here for 15 plus years, I took out each Super Bowl picture we have, and my wife, I think my wife framed it for me. And you look at that Super Bowl 25 against the Giants, and we were all smiling, and our hair was black or, whatever. And you look at that picture in Atlanta, and you're looking at guys that are gray and the wrinkles in their face. They're not smiling. And it's like that. It was that emotional toll, because what a lot of people might not realize, and I don't want any self-pity, we played 5 seasons in 4.
Yep.
And that, I don't care what anybody says, that's a toll. That takes a toll on you. And we lost people. We lost Jim. We lost Kent Holt for a few games. I had to go into center. We lost Bruce Smith. We lost Cornelius Bennett. We lost a group of players during that time. But fortunately enough for us that we had I just think it was a special group because we had the resolve, and we leaned on each other, and we just said, by God, he's hurt. We got to get past it. Our goal is home field advantage. And that was our main goal, because we knew if we had home field advantage, then nothing could stop us. So, again, what happened in Cincinnati is far greater than what I just explained, but it kind of gives you an idea of the emotional roller coaster ride that we went on.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's you mentioned it, and it's one of the questions I wanted to ask you coming into this, because a couple of the guys I think said it after the game on Sunday. And I wanted to ask you any instances. Matt Milano said after the game, he's just like, the guys just didn't have it. And I muttered to myself in the first quarter, you guys said you woke up. I woke up with last couple playoff games, I woke up like excited energy. I woke up same thing as you guys, kind of just like, I don't know, not was excited, but just there was something else. And then just could tell in that second drive, whatever, just man, just doesn't look like it. And I wonder, John, how is that a thing going into some of these games, or can you realize it within a couple second drive when you're up against a team where, I think it's even talent level across the board, but when that they're just it looked like the Bills were on their heels from the defense and offense from the first snap. Can you tell in some of those games, especially big games in big games, whether that be playoffs, regular season, whatever, can you just tell when your guys are just reeling right away?
Well, don't let me forget this. I'll tell you why they were on their heels in a minute. But yes, okay. I can do that. The Houston Oilers game, we came out. Now again, this is kind of hard, because what the Bills went through against Cincinnati, they played an emotionally high game for New England. They played a half of an emotionally high game against Miami. And then I just kind of looked at them and I thought, you know what, those guys have hit a wall. And I think in the back of their mind, they were thinking they had other things on their mind, other things that were, and I don't want to make light of it. I know I feel like I'm walking the fence, but they just had other stuff that was more important on their mind. And and they couldn't help it, and I understood that. We came out against Houston. We knew what was on the line, and we knew that we were better than Houston, but every mistake you can make. We didn't have Jim, but having Frank Reich's not a step down really back then, because he was so smart. You know, he might not have been able to do everything Jim did, but Frank was so smart. We knew we were in good hands. When we go in at halftime, we're thinking, my God, what in the hell is going on? We just all look at each other, and I'm not going to lie to you. Some of us were kind of packing our duffel bags, you know, because we're like, we're getting ready to get blown out of this building.
Yeah.
And then Marv just came in and said, what do you got to lose? You know, what is there to lose? And you could kind of tell walking down that tunnel, it kind of clicked. And then you get that first score, you get that second score. Houston kind of kicks themselves in the hill and gives us another one. And then you build it up into the greatest, you know, comeback. And I call it today, it might not be the greatest comeback of all time, but it is the greatest comeback playoff win of all time. So I still get to hold on to that part. You know, but emotionally there are games that individuals aren't ready for. You know, I know a lot of times, you know, I would go to sleep against the Jets, and the Jets were one of the hardest teams I ever had to play against, just because of who I played with. And it was that way for every player. And then it kind of takes you a quarter, 2 quarters to kind of get slapped around to say, okay, you know, we got to kick it in. And it just didn't seem like the Bills did that. And I hate it for them because, you know, they worked so hard to get to this point. And I hated it for them, but you could just tell from the beginning that they weren't in it. Cincinnati is a system team. And I feel like we have our hardest games against system teams, and you know, and I'm not a coach, but you know, that's just one man's opinion.
And on the note of to begin the game, we have a question here from our friends at Two Goalies, One Mic. John, do you think Buffalo should have taken the ball on offense to start the game rather than defer? He went on to say in another comment, they haven't been the same team they were to start the season, whether it's due to injury or not. I would have liked to see them draw first blood and dictate the game from the jump.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't really know the philosophy behind that. I had heard one time in Orchard Park, you kind of do it because of the wind and you know, especially in the wintertime. I personally would take the ball every time. I would want to show my offense that I have enough confidence in you to run the ball down the field and set the tone instead of sitting back and saying, okay, well, we're going to get the other goal or the other field position, you know, the second half. And what if we have the ball the last possession of the second quarter and we get it the first possession of the third quarter? I can't think that far down, you know. So I'm one of those guys that give me the ball at the first of the game. Let's set the tone of the game, and then we'll take care of everything else. And but again, it's just, you know, they have their reasons to do that.
Yeah, I think they
definitely. I don't remember the second part. Sorry.
Oh yeah, he just kind of followed up on his thoughts. Like he said, he would have liked to see them take the ball first and draw first blood, or at least attempt to. And it seems like you're in agreement there, Jake. What were you gonna say?
No, it's funny because I was thinking about that earlier today too, and just like knowing the Bengals specifically, the Bengals, I knew going into that game, I remember hearing it or reading it somewhere that they love to take the ball every time too, and it just felt like such an opportunity. They already showed you their first scripted drive in the first game, and you know that they could script the drive, go right down the field.
Right.
All year, the Bills got killed by scripted first drives. Anyways, like they just struggled all year.
Yeah, I got to be a fan. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I'm a huge fan of Joe Burrows.
Yeah. How can't you be, right?
That kid's cool. And now, again, he's in a system. You know, and I feel like, and again, I'm not going to question our coordinators. I'm not going to, you know, question the play callers, but Josh Allen taking a shotgun snap and running around for 5 seconds and throwing it 50 yards is not a game plan. And I saw that all too often during the season. I'm not saying every play, but I'm just saying I saw that too often.
Yeah,
and that's
more than we'd like.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons, you know, we had discussed earlier before the show. That's why I was so disappointed in the offensive line. And it's like I told you, I have the right to say something. It's not that I'm being critical of them, but I have the right to say the effort wasn't there. I just didn't see any passion. I didn't see any just, you know, meanness about them. And I just thought, you know, when I and look, I'm not gonna lie to you, I used to get beat. And that's part of the game, and I understand it. But I never stood there and watched my guy run by me to go after Josh Allen.
That's what really bothered me because, and I was a huge fan of the Roger Saffold acquisition in the offseason, especially pairing him with Aaron Kromer, reuniting them from their days in the Rams just from a couple of years ago. Thought that was a absolute slam dunk of a decision by Brandon Beane and the rest of the brass out there. But he was largely very disappointing, and it's not just him. It was the offensive line as a whole. And I was excited to ask you about this because it's not often we get someone who's like so in tune to just the offensive line on the show. Halfway through the season or so, there was some kind of stat that said like the Bills had like their top 5 guys, their actual like 5 listed starters playing at the same time together, like bottom 5 in the NFL. Like they were just always hurt. They never got out there together. But when they were a top 3 offensive line.
Right.
So
well, you could tell. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you can choose between consistency in the guys on the offensive line or talent, is there a debate to be had there?
Explain that if I understand you right. Explain it a little bit better. I mean, are you saying that have your 5 best or what?
Or just like having the same 5 to 6 throughout the entire season, because it seems like the Bills were just dealing with so many offensive line injuries. I don't want to make excuses for them, but it would have been hard for that group to really get in a groove at any point this season.
So you're right. So ideally, you've got 8 linemen that dress. Ideally, and it doesn't, because I went through the same thing back when I played. Ideally, you want to have 5. And Jim Kelly, fortunately enough, went in the 90 season and said, look, I want John at guard. And then that kind of solidified our offensive line. And but somebody gets hurt, you've got another guy come in. And what happens is, and I'm not saying it happens with our team, but number 6, 7, and 8 don't get the reps that 1 through 5 get.
Of course.
But if you have the ability to do the same film study, and you have the ability to do the same individual drills, and you have the ability to vision everything as a backup, like I had to do for 3 years. As a backup, I had to envision that was me in there. And then you hope like hell when you get in there, it all clicks, and whoever gets hurt, the next guy that comes in, it stays together. I will say this about our offensive line, though, when I played, is that we had great communication. Kent Holt did a great job communicating from the center out. And then, for example, me and Howard Ballard had great communication, and Richard and Will Wolford had great communication. When you bring in those 6, 7, and 8 guys, sometimes you lose that communication, somewhere down the line, and mistakes are going to be made. It's not so much physical as it is the communication part. That's my opinion. And I remember playing for Houston, and I'd go in with Dean Steinkuhler at right tackle and Bruce Matthews at center, and here I am, you got Outland Trophy winner, and you've got, a future Hall of Famer, and then you've got me. I'm like, boys, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they're like, you just do what we tell you. They tell me what to do, and I was great. I say I was great, but I was good to go. I did what they told me to do. But as you get a little bit older, it doesn't work that way as much. I don't know if it was a lack of communication. I don't know what kind of schemes they have. I was actually trying to find out what type of scheme they were running, because we had no running game, so to speak. And
it's been that way for years too. Whatever it's been that way for years.
I don't care what you say. If you can't run the ball, you're not going to win. I don't care what you say. You've got to be up there in the 26 to 32 carries for 120 to 150 yards, and then let Josh Allen make his plays, And by the way, Josh Allen doesn't need to have 18 of those 26 carries, because that's the quickest way to get rid of your star quarterback. So I just don't know. I don't know. I honestly think if they go back and look, they need. I think they have 7 or 8 choices. They might have 9 choices. I can't remember. But out of those choices, 3 of them need to be offensive linemen in the top 5. That's just my That's just my opinion.
3 in the top 5. Interesting.
3 in the
Okay.
top.
I agree
top
with
5
that.
rounds. Top
Yeah,
5
no, I think I would agree with it too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you've got to get some beef in there. You get Spencer Brown, bless his heart. You know, he's 6'10". That's great, but what is he? 270? Or you know, I mean, he looks like a beanpole out there. And
Yeah.
it's nothing against him. It's just that, you know, it's just not working. And I hate to say that. And I might pay for it when I come back up there in the summer, but that's just, you know, we all have our opinions, correct?
For sure, of course.
So
I think a lot of those guys would agree that they wish they had better seasons too. Like I don't think that's going to be
sure.
like, and that's the thing too. Like if they're looking at it too, I think there's a lot of plays that were left on the field, and a lot of times Allen hits, like you said, most valuable asset. I think someone tweeted the other day, most valuable asset maybe in Western New York, like in the whole economy, the community, everything. Like we need to invest everything to make sure that he's okay. Don't leave any stone unturned. And maybe we draft somebody and it makes Spencer Brown turns him into a monster, and he's like, I'm not letting that guy take my spot. Like those types of things could happen too.
No, and you're exactly right. And on that point, I was asked the other night, you know, you got to remember, I was an 11th round draft choice. I go to Houston and I'm on the field with 4 number 1s, and I'm 11th round. And so for 2 years, and then I come to Buffalo and you've got Kent Hull, you got Jim Richard, you got Joe Devlin, you got Howard Ballard, which was my age. And then you got Will Wolford, arguably one of the best top 3 lines in the league, top 4 lines in the league, and trying to make that. And so the communication, you know, the pressure is so big for the communication part of it, is that, you know, it was hard because getting back to my original thought about being an 11th rounder is that I walked out of that stadium every night and got in my car and was like, I made it another day, because I could be cut at any time, because the Bills don't have that much invested in me. You know, I'm 11th round pick, I'm minimal salary, you know, and sometimes I forget these guys that come in there who are higher round draft picks are like, well, I had a bad game. We'll get it fixed, you know, next week. Well, my philosophy was, well, I had a crappy practice. I better get it fixed tomorrow or I'm not going to be here. And so I'm just wondering about some of them's mentality. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but I can just see things. I'm not an expert, but I can just see things on the field to where it's almost one of those, I don't give a shit. I don't, you know, excuse my language. Sorry. You know, we'll just move on to the next play. And I realize you have to do that, but it just looks so flippant that again, that goes back to me getting. And I get too invested into it, and I'm just like, you know what? I just need to be a fan and enjoy it.
Hey, no, no, listen, you say that, but most fans are not enjoying it even when it's going well. They're still just getting angry when things are going well. So you're doing well with the mindset there. You're trying to enjoy it. That's better than most of them.
Well, exactly. Well, you know, some of my most fun times was running out of that tunnel with the fans there, and I'm just like, you know, I'd play in Houston and there might be 30,000 people there. Well, you know, we had 70,000 at preseason games, and just like, holy crap, what have I walked into? But you know, but it was just one of those where the 6 years experience was phenomenal. Even the 94 season when we went 500, you know, it was still phenomenal. But you know, we were just so tired. You know, in 94 is that it's just like we were shot. And, you know, obviously they had to make changes. It's a business, you know, as much as you hate to say that. But the fan experience up there was just absolutely phenomenal. Unlike anywhere that I've ever played. I've never been, you know, I'll give you one example. We beat Denver in 91 or 92. I forget. It was a night game. I think we scored like 21 or 19 points or something in a minute 19, something like that. I mean, I'm on the sideline, and I think Steve Tasker blocked a punt, and I think Nate Odoms, I think, got a pick off, and then the next play or two, we scored a long touchdown. I think we scored like 21 points in less than a minute and a half. And I'm on the sideline, and I feel like I was levitating because it was so loud. You actually were shaking. It was so loud.
Yeah.
and it's just phenomenal. You know, I remember being there for the Jets game when it snowed for like 30 days in a row, and the fans were shoveling their seats out. We still had 70,000 people at that stadium. You know, and I mean, they're diehard great fans that I you know, my big thing to the players that come in now is that if you embrace in Buffalo, they will embrace you. Yeah. And I've always said that from the very first game that I stepped on the preseason game. I told a reporter that he said, "Why'd you come here?" I said, "Because I played here at Houston. Y'all beat us on January 1st, your first playoff win in like 20 something years." And I said, I wanted to go to a place to where that the fans would embrace you, but in order for that to happen, you had to embrace the fans. And I feel like that happened for me for those 6 years, and I've made some lifelong friends up there that I enjoy getting to see. They've been to my house down here in Atlanta, and I've really enjoyed that time, those years that were there.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I've been to many different stadiums, and there's only one stadium I've ever been in that has been louder than the Ralph. And of course, it's a dome, it's an indoor stadium, but it was that Houston playoff game. I have never heard anything louder than that after.
And you can give credit to Bills fans for that too. So.
Oh, you can give credit to Bills. Yeah, no, it was loud.
Oh, you're talking about the Houston Texans.
Talking about the Texans playoff
2020,
game.
Yeah, okay.
Back in 2020. Yeah. But you brought up that Denver game, and so I was on a website, Pro Football Reference, so I thought I would go back and see. Yeah, you guys went into the fourth quarter down 21-9, and it doesn't give timestamps for the play-by-play, but the next three scores are a Cornelius Bennett 80-yard blocked field goal return for a touchdown, a Leonard Smith 39-yard pick six, and Kenneth Davis punching one in from the 2-yard line.
Okay.
And that was to make you guys go up 29-21. 20 unanswered points to start the fourth quarter.
Unbelievable. I want to say it was like a minute and 19 seconds. And then the next week or the week before, we beat the Raiders. And I think the Raiders was the one that Steve Tasker had a block punt. And then I don't know why Nate Odoms keeps coming up in my mind and stuff. But then we came in and we were down. And I want to say we were down. You got to forgive me. I'm losing my mind. But
you were down 24-14.
Okay.
Wow. And then you won 38-24.
Yeah. So it's phenomenal. And the fans were, you know, obviously a huge part of that because, you know, when they stepped it up, you literally couldn't hear anybody. And how, you know, how the other team, you know, communicated was, I mean, they didn't because, you know, Bruce Smith, imagine having Bruce Smith on one side, Cornelius, and then you got Daryl Talley. You got to worry about. Oh, by the way, Shane's in the middle, and then you got Phil Hansen's over here, and then you've got Nate and Leonard Smith, and you're like thinking to myself, what are these guys looking at? So, and I'm not tooting their horn, but those were some great defenses. We didn't do everything we achieved or wanted to achieve, but those were some great defenses back then.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was a lot of fun. I tell you what, it's a lot of great memories. I go back on YouTube when I'm on the treadmill and I'll watch the games and I'll watch the defense just because you never get to watch them because, you know, you're over trying to get oxygen and stuff on the sideline. Yeah. But to watch the way they played in some of those big games was absolutely phenomenal.
I'm sure it's a treat to get to go back and watch just from like that outside perspective too. Like just like watch it on TV, like you were just living in that moment, and then to just see how everybody else was watching it too. It's like a little surreal, but also just like this is crazy because I never experienced it like this.
And I go back wondering how I made it 6 years because we're always our hardest critic. And I was like thinking, oh my God, that right guard sucks. And but you know, you come out and make a good block and it would all be good again. But no, it's a lot of fun. And especially when I get to go up for alumni weekend and get to kind of experience the tailgate outside before we go into the stadium and there's some autograph signings and stuff. And it's just nice watching them on the field and you kind of flash back and you know, imagine yourself running down the tunnel or and then running out on the field. And you know, I was my son over Thanksgiving asked me if I was ever nervous, and I said I was nervous up until the first play, And then after the first play, it all settled down and it became real. But that hour leading up to that kind of is kind of physically, for me, it was more physically draining than it was emotionally draining.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I used to like, do my little Pat Coletta on the ice, like just doing like this during like when I was playing soccer in high school. I can't
Yeah.
imagine, and there were maybe 50 people in the stands and most of them were parents and children. So
Yeah, but still,
it's very, very different. Very
if you
different,
don't
but I can imagine.
if you don't get butterflies, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly,
We
yeah.
had to listen to
True.
Jim Kelly throw up just about every game. So
You threw up before every game?
Just about every game. We knew we knew when we heard someone in the bathroom throwing up that we were ready to play. But Jim always came to play, and what a great teammate and what a great quarterback. And I just I know I keep saying it, but that period that I was there from '89 to '94 was just a special time, and it's a lot of great memories. And for there are still people out there who's like, well, you didn't win a Super Bowl. And my thought to them was, you know what, we didn't win one. I said, but I think we have 8 Hall of Fame guys or 9 Hall of Fame guys during that era that's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I said, so you can't tell me that we weren't special. And we were special. And I think the fans embraced it. I know we broke their hearts, and I've told them, I said, you broke my heart. And I'm like, well, how do you think I feel?
Yeah.
And then one
Yeah,
guy was
right.
like, you cost me $1,000, and I'm like, well, how much money do you think I lost?
Yeah, right.
But I understand their pain. I understand. We lived up in Williamsville my first year.
Okay.
And to see the passion from these fans, especially the small fans, is that we had like 3 different kids we would let mow our yard because they used that money to buy season tickets. And I was just like, and so we just like, yeah, go. I mean, we had the nicest lawn because it was mowed about every 5 or 6 days. And but that was just the passion of those kids and the fans and stuff. I remember being on the turf stretching, and I would just be looking up at the fans, and you'd see just how in tune they were to it. And this is 30 plus years ago, and I can't imagine what it's like today with Bill's Mafia, with the insanity of that.
I will say that whatever pain and everything else that came out of it, I'm obviously now I would say 3rd generation Bills fan. My grandma had season tickets.
Okay.
My dad's lifelong Bills fan. And so and now I think he gets more angry at them nowadays than he ever got at you guys, at least from what I've heard. But it could be looking at it with rose-colored glasses, all these years later. But I did want to ask you something. You brought up a lot of good things about the good old days, and I think that I have an interesting question for myself and for my co-host here for 2 places that I know in Western New York that you've been to a lot of years in your time. I'm from Dunkirk, New York, in Western New York, so I would like to hear a story, if you've got any story that you feel comfortable telling about Fredonia State, Fredonia, New York, because my dad, like that's really where it started though. Like my dad was at every practice, like every single practice 4 years straight, however many years they were there, longer than that. But for your time there, was probably there every day, didn't even realize it, but that's kind of where it breeded. But that's my hometown. I would love to hear a story. And then Wake here from Angola, Sunset Bay. I know that don't have to give me anything crazy, John, but I know what you guys were up to in both these places. So I'd love to hear just probably great team bonding. I'm sure, like just being together in those areas.
Yes.
Like
they talk
team
about
bonding was the emphasis.
but they talk about St. John Fisher being in the dorms and everything and how unique it is. I know it was more prevalent back then, but just an interesting time.
I'll do the second one first. I don't think I don't think I went to Sunset. Is it Sunset Bay? Yes. I think I went maybe one time, to be honest with you. I don't think
you're a good man.
I didn't say I didn't go. I didn't say I didn't go out. I just said I don't think I ever went there, but maybe one time.
Gotcha.
I heard there was a special teams player and a wide receiver that had a lot of fun out there back here in the day. But I know that. I can't confirm that. But I'll tell you 3 quick stories about practice and your dad.
Oh, here we go.
I come in from Houston, and Houston had an owner, Bud Adams.
Yep.
And was a drunk. And I go up. I'm on the practice field, and Ralph Wilson's standing over there, and he's like, Davis. He said, "Get over here." I'm like, I knew who he was, and I'm like, "Yes, sir." And I went over, and he said, I need a story about Bud." I said, "Okay." So I'm standing there, and I said, "We won a game." And at the end of the day, it's really not that funny. But at the end of the game, we're all in there celebrating, and my number was 73, and Mike Munchak's number was 63, and there were a couple of guys in between us. And of course, Mike Munchak's Hall of Fame. You know, he was Hall of Fame even while he was playing. And Bud comes in, he's got a Scotch glass, and I said, he came up to me and sloshing his Scotch all over me and saying, "Munchak, I just want to say this is the greatest game I've ever seen you play." And I looked at Bud and I said, "Well, Mr. Adams, I appreciate that." I said, "But Munchak's right down there." And Ralph and Bud's like, oh, you know, and got all startled and went down there. And I told Ralph that, and I thought he was going to fall over. Trainer starts running over. He's like, what have you done to Mr. Wilson and stuff? And I said, he just asked me for a story about Bud Adams. I didn't do anything. And that's when Ralph and I kind of hit it off. You know, we kind of clicked from there, and we would talk before every game and stuff. And the other one was, you know, back, you can ask your dad about this, but back in the day, you know, the offense and defensive line would do pass rushing drills. And we would always go to a little section near the fence, but there happened to be benches there. You know, what do they call those? You know, the stair, but what do you call them? The benches that the fans sit on.
The risers, or like the metal ones.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
And I'm like, what's going on here? And we'd get down there, and then all of a sudden there'd be 1,000. I don't know. To me, it was like 10,000, but you know how many fans used to come. But I would be like standing down there. Well, you got to remember, I'm coming over from Houston, and I've got to make the team. Now, they brought me over as a guard and a center, but I got to make the team. Well, Will Wolford was out. And so the coach came up to me, and he said, "Who wants to play left tackle?" And I'm like, "Well, hell, I'll do it, you know, because again, I got to make the team." Well, we had been in camp long enough to where my wife had just gotten to the point where she had just on the way from Georgia, she had just stopped at training camp that first day that we did this. And I go out to left tackle, and I go up against Bruce Smith, and the first pass protection, whew, and I'm like, okay, I did really well. Let's do this again. So we come back in there. It's like, whew, you know, he goes right inside them. Don't even lay a hand on him. And that happened 3 or 4 times. Well, by then the fans were like, "Davis, get your ass back to Houston." They just unloaded on me. And I was fine. I mean, I knew that I'd never played left tackle.
You're like, "I'm a guard. What do you want from me out here?"
So let me finish this, and I'll tell you something else. So I do that, and they're just ripping me, and the fans. Well, my wife is just like nobody knew obviously who she was. And we go after practice, and we go out and have a little bite to eat. And she's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "You suck. You can't even block Bruce Smith." Like, you are kidding, right? You know who this is, don't you? It's probably the greatest defensive lineman in the NFL. Well, I don't care. You should at least be able to block him. So I'll never forget that, because the fans just ripped into me. But and Bruce will tell you this today. I played some center my last 2 years there, and that's when they were moving Bruce around. And they put Bruce on me at center, and he never got by me.
There we go.
It's because I could get my hands on him. And Bruce was pissed. He's like, "No, I want to go again." I'm like, "Okay, shoot." "No, I want to go again." I'm like, "Okay." And I do the same thing, and he'd get so mad. So I wasn't able to stop him that. And my last story is, I kid you not, and then if y'all want to cut me off, that's great. My last story is, you know, I told you earlier about 30,000 fans in Houston for a game. And I told my wife, Hester, for the first preseason game, we were playing the Saints. And I said, Hester, we got parking passes close to the stadium, and I gave it to her because I rode in with someone else. I said, Hester, I said, I heard they have a pretty big crowd. I said, so you might want to get there early so you get a good parking place. She's like, no worries. Well, what does she do? She arrives 5 minutes before the game and parks way over there past the bubble, the old bubble that we had.
Yep.
I come out, she's like, yeah, she said, I didn't make it as early as I hoped to. We had to park way over there. And I'm like, okay. So we're walking, and I get up we get on the road and one of the side roads by the bubble into the stadium, and I hear somebody call out, say, he's like, hey, Davis. And I look over, and it's this big group with 2 huge tents sitting there. He said, come on over here. We want to welcome you and feed you and give you a couple of beers and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's cool with me. It keeps me from having to walk another 200 yards. It was a group, and I'm so sorry. I got messaged from a guy in Fredonia and Dunkirk. It was a group from Fredonia and Dunkirk,
Okay.
who I met with, and they took me in.
That's awesome.
And I tell you that I get chills right now because Fran was one of the names, and I swear I can't remember some of the other names. But for 6 years at every home game we were able to, we stopped by and had some food and beers with them. They had food.
Oh, that's
and beer.
awesome.
Oh, wow.
And the last game, we kind of knew that I probably wouldn't be back. And Olivia was 1, 2, 3. Olivia was just about to turn 4, and she came to the game with her, with Hester, mom, and I went out there. We lost the game, I believe, knocked us out of the playoffs, and I went out there and we had a beer and some brats and just kind of hugged each other because the next game was an away game, and we just kind of hugged and said goodbye. That we'd see you next year. And about 3 weeks later, I got a picture. I wish I had it with me. It's downstairs, I believe, but we got a picture. And you know how pretty those sunsets are from Rich Stadium as you're looking over the far end zone, over Erie Lake, or not Erie Lake, but that area that I'm talking about, Lake Erie. And we got a picture in the mail of me and Hester holding Julia or Olivia and our holding their hands, walking towards that sunlight away from them. And that to me was classic Buffalo. And
that's beautiful.
And I saw those guys for 6 years, and I just knew that this was a special place. And to get to spend, they just called me over, said, get over here. We will give you a beer and a brat. And I just sat there. We talked to them for about an hour, and they're like, get out of here, go have dinner with your wife and stuff. And, that's just the type of people they were. They just weren't pushy. They all gave me a hug. And I came out the year I started in 90, and looked up. You come down the tunnel, and it's the corner end zone, to your left. And I look up, and there's about 15 of them wearing my jersey. And I'm like, holy crap, how special is that? And
that's awesome.
And that and those are the memories. I'm 57, and I'm very well mentally, but you think about those times, and it's just what makes Buffalo so special.
Well,
Definitely.
It's great to hear you share all those memories. It's great to hear just all of it. It's not a shock that it seems that Buffalo and the fandom hasn't really changed since the 90s. But it's always awesome to hear how this mentality, the culture within this city has transcended generations and decades, and having people like you to tell those stories on here. It's really awesome. So and I've always said, sorry to interrupt, but I've always said, if you embrace Buffalo, they'll embrace you. And I think that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest difference, is that they're very forgiving, but they're very supportive. They can be very hard, but they love you. And if you go out there and you play 100%, they're always going to be behind you. And when I go up there and I see my friends outside of football,
they're like, oh my God, you're part of that offensive line of the 90s. Yeah, I remember you. You were that last piece of the puzzle that we put together, and that means a whole lot. That's a lot of good memories.
Yeah, really awesome. Well, John, this is unfortunately where our time together reaches the end of its road tonight. So, want to thank you for joining us. Would love to catch up with you again, maybe sometime in the off season when
anytime.
we're gearing up for preseason. Maybe get your thoughts on what this new Bills offensive line could look like in the 2023-24 season.
Well,
and
now
maybe
you're trying
some
to
prospects or something. I don't know.
Now you're trying to give me homework, but yeah, no, I would love to. This has been great. I appreciate it. I'd love to reconnect. I haven't been up since the COVID started, so I'm looking forward to getting back up this summer and fall. But I appreciate y'all having me on. Two great guys, and send me the link so I can put it up on my webpage, and I look forward to hearing from you later.
Absolutely. Well, John, if you ever make it back up here, wings on me. All right.
All right.
Hey.
Barbell, and I'll make sure Micah comes into town for it. So
yeah, and if you're in Chicago,
reunion.
say, well, we'll find the wings. I haven't found good wings yet, but we'll find something good.
That sounds good. I'll hold you to it.
Well, thank you again, John. Thank you, Picasso's Pizza. Thank you, Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case, whether it's wine, spirits, seltzers, Loganberry seltzers. They got those. So stock up at Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case. No, the Bills aren't, unfortunately, contending for the Super Bowl, but Super Bowl parties, no one's going to get you ready for that quite like Outlet Liquor and our friends at Picasso's. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight, listening on YouTube, Twitter, Spotify, Apple, wherever you do. Thank you. We appreciate it. For myself, John Davis, Jake Micah, and everyone here at Trainwreck Sports, good night now.
Good night. Thank you, guys.